once you have a good sales process, basically you've got a way to close every closable deal. And that doesn't mean every deal will close. Not everyone should, but everyone that should, you will close it and know why. And everyone that doesn't close, you know exactly why it didn't work out. That's what a good sales process does, is there's no more guesswork. You don't walk away going, I wonder if it was one of the 30 things I said. I wonder if I missed something. You know, you have the data. So that's the difference between having a process and not having a process.
What's up, y'all? Coming back at you with another episode of the CarrotCast. I've got a returner, and not just any returner here, but I'll reintroduce you guys to our guest here in a second. But we were looking through Brady and myself on my team. He's right on the other side of my desk right now. We were looking through some of the stats from the past 12 months, and we're going, man, let's see what worked really well. Let's see what was really resonating with people in our previous 12, 18 months of podcasts. And one jumped out for in front of us in a big way, and it was the man that we've got on today. His first time he was here at the CarrotCast, and it was on negotiation. It was on, how do you really stand out in this type of a market and negotiate. And we went over a lot of really amazing things, and John took us through an example of what you might say with the seller, but we kind of kept it high level. So when we were looking at the stats, we're going, man, we need to bring John Martinez back on, and where we are in the market. We'll talk about where we are in the market and what he's seeing working with a lot of the biggest investors in the country, and going, cool, what should you do now in this really busy, really cluttered market when you're talking with your sellers of real estate to go, sweet, this right here is going to help you stand out. This right here is going to help you crack through. So I want to welcome back to the CarrotCast, Mr. John Martinez. Thanks, man.
Hey, thanks for having me, man. I've been looking forward to this one for a little while.
Good, dude. And you were saying right before we hit record, you were saying, man, I keep on getting consistent people saying they heard me on the first episode, and it has very little to do with us. And we have an amazing community, but has everything to do with the way that you present and the way that your mind works. And I just so appreciate it, man, because we're both in Investor Fuel. I haven't been there this year. I'm gonna see if I can't make one next year. But one thing that I consistently hear from everyone in Investor Fuel, you can just go down the names. A lot of them have been on the podcast. Is it's like, you've got to do this, and then you've got to work with John Martinez. And man, you're just lighting people's businesses up. So I appreciate you. So for people who don't know you, and then we'll dive into how do you negotiate better in this market with their sellers to win more deals. But for people who don't know you, man, who are you? What do you do for real estate investors?
Yeah, so I'm a sales trainer, but we focus on real estate investing. So I work with investors who do the buying themselves, and then with tons of acquisition agents too, when they if and when they take the leap and get out of the sales portion and start bringing in acquisition agents to handle that for them.
So what's your percentage, if you have a percentage, how much of the people that work with you are the actual founder, the actual investor versus someone that's their team member?
Dang near 100% of the teams we work with, whether it's a solopreneur or an investor with the team, the investor, the owner investor is on the call.
Sweet.
And the reason for that, on the training calls, and the reason for that is because they have to know what to hold their team accountable to, right? We can train, but they have to, be held accountable by somebody. But if I was going to split between the solopreneurs and the medium to large teams, I'd say solo is probably 20 to 25% of our business, because they either start out as solo, even if they do start out solo, very quickly, they usually start pulling themselves out of that role, start hiring it out. So small percentage.
Cool. So John, I kind of want to dig into this a little bit. So like I said, on the last episode, I kind of took through an example of talking with the seller. We talked about some ways to overcome objections and things like that. And I want to kind of reverse back to a couple specific scenarios on our end. And then I want to kind of dive into what you're seeing and how people can, all the way from where the call comes in to meeting with the people, other things you can say now to stand out. Well, I want to go through another example like that. But so I talk with a lot of high-end clients here on the Carrot side. And one thing that I was talking with you about before we hit record was the first 6 months of the year, especially the first quarter, we were having a good amount of those clients reach out to us. We had one today reach out to us that said, my pay-per-click isn't getting as much performance. My direct mail, it's not performing as well. It seems like everything was going amazing. We netted $500,000 from my online side last year, and now it's like trickled way down. And so we started to look at things. We're going, shoot, is it the volume? Is it that, is it the PPC is just not working in their market anymore?
Yeah.
Is it the direct mail isn't working? And in general, on the online side, the lead volume for some people did go down a little bit, but in a lot of them, the lead volume was the same, but they weren't closing as many deals. So their lead volume was about the same. Their cost per lead increased just because of the competition, right? Their lead per deal ratio took a nosedive. And on our end, then I want to toss over to you after this. When we were looking at things, we're going, okay, cool. Let's do a comparison, them against the other players in their market on the online side of it. And in general, the ones that were getting a hit were the ones that didn't need to pile their websites with credibility and authority 2 or 3 years ago. But now their competition, who is way less experienced than them, when you Google them versus the competition wins online because they look a lot more credible, better reviews, more reviews. They actually have content and videos on their websites, and they start to go, the online perception is this company's more credible. So the pre-frame is what we're really good at here at Carrot. What you're amazing at is once the lead comes in, and now what do you do next? That's a little tip I want to toss to people before we talk about the sales side of it, is no matter how great the sales side of it is, you could be putting yourself at a disadvantage right out of the gates if your website doesn't have the credibility built in, if you aren't focusing on getting reviews online, because that pre-frames every conversation that they're going to have with you or your competitors before they even step in the door. So do that. Have you seen anything on that side of things, man, where are you guiding your students to start to pre-frame better and build more credibility online, or how do you help them do that, if any?
Yeah, seeing the exact same thing. Basically, just more competition out there. But yeah, you're exactly right. The better, in some industries, it's all marketing, very little sales or even human interaction. In some businesses and industries, it's all sales, very little marketing. Real estate is a pretty even combination of both. You got to really be good at both of them. They go hand in hand, though. The better you are at marketing, the easier the sale becomes on the back end. You can even think of it just as content goes, just like this podcast. If someone applies to our training and they've seen one of the podcasts, let's say we did previously, that person's going to be much more likely to become a client because they already know who I am. They're already comfortable. They know what we do. So yeah, it has a huge impact. The better your marketing is, the easier the sales piece is.
Cool. I love it. And guys, here's a couple things you can do is we talk about it quite a bit on the Facebook side of things. Make sure you're taking some of your client testimonials, your videos, your own content on how you're the niche authority, plug those into your Facebook retargeting campaign rather than just a big old banner that says, we'll buy your house with a house on it, because that's something that everybody does. Get videos on there, engage with people, let people know after they opt in or they land on your website, hey, this is how the process will work. When John shows up to your house on our team, here's what we'll look at and here's how it will work. And start to do those things and start to build out that same kind of content in your websites, y'all, because that's going to make everything that John's going to tell you way, way, way more effective than it already is. So now let's assume the person came in, they got the lead, we pre-framed them, go to the website, they're like, man, they're awesome, or maybe even they're not. The lead comes in. Are you seeing any kind of trends right now as far as follow-up? How is follow-up having to change with your clients versus how it was 3 years ago? Is there anything that's changed now that you're guiding people on?
Not so much that anything has changed, but it is just more important. With more competition, you just have to tighten everything up. So I wouldn't say we have any new tactics or strategies. It's just the actual execution has to be spot on. It's more important than ever.
Mm-hmm. So I know I've seen a lot of stats, dude, where it says, every minute after 5 minutes or whatever, getting back to people, the percentage goes down. Do you? We don't do any sales like that on our side, right? So we don't have that type of experience. But how are you guiding people to answer calls all live? Is it is there a certain time period where it's like, hey, answer everything under this time period that you're guiding people on? Kind of what's the ideal process? A client gets a lead. Here's when they should get back to them. Should they then book a meeting from that meeting? Book an appointment from that meeting. And then kind of, I'm going to toss it over to you and let you roll, and I'll quit asking questions. And I want to go, like, you have things that you're teaching in your workshops with your clients and working with their clients that no matter how good the questions I ask are, I won't even ask the right question. So I'm going to turn over to you after that and go, cool. What are the biggest things that investors that are seeing their deals and their deal volume and their lead per deal trickle down? What should they do to shift it?
First off, I'll say, I probably work. We really don't work with any newbies. All of the investors we work with are probably, very high caliber. They've been doing it a while. Deal flow is super high, high quality stuff. And I'll just say that probably 95 to 99% of them, if not 100, they're answering live, or if they miss it, they're immediately calling back. So the best of the best are live or almost immediate callback. And I recommend it. And the reason why I recommend that is because of what you need to accomplish with that call. Here's the deal. When people call in or when they submit a lead or whatever they do to contact an investor, they're doing it because they have a problem. And that problem is tugging at them. And they want some relief. They want to feel like they've taken a step, like they're starting to solve it, like they're doing something about it. And they're not going to feel that relief until they know, hey, I've done something. I've checked that box off. So what that call really represents, what that first conversation represents, is you can relax. You will be taken care of. You've done your part. Now it's on us to do ours. Just relax. We got it from here. And until the seller feels that, they're gonna have to get that pain solved. They want it to go away, so they're gonna call someone else. They're gonna click on another ad. They're gonna search for another solution. So that's what you're really trying to solve with quick feedback. Now, the easiest way to do that is just to chat with someone right when they call in. There's other ways you can give that message and let them know. But that's really what you want to accomplish when a lead comes in.
Dude, and that's one of the biggest things. We were one of those clients I was talking about, loved them to death and did amazing. Might be listening to this episode of the podcast. Did amazing with the traffic we were driving them last year, but then the volume did go down a little bit as far as the leads, but the close volume went down a lot. And as we were kind of diving in and looking at what is the follow-up process, are they answered live? How many steps does it take to go from that person's call to actually getting in front of them? And it was at least 2 to 3 separate calls that would have to happen before the person would actually get an appointment booked with the person on the ground in that city, rather than on the first call. And then next, it was sometimes 90 minutes, sometimes later that night when the call would even be returned. And so as we were working with the client, we're like, man, if you can just tighten up that part, answer these things live, maybe you, because he has a bunch of other real estate agents around the country that were being the reps to buy these houses. I said, I don't know, man, maybe like for a month or a week, maybe you answer some of those calls so you can kind of get a feel for what's happening there. And then you can start to do the new playbook, figure out what the pains and questions they're asking, and work with your people. So shifting after that, they answer the call. What are some of the big things you're seeing pop up right now, working with all the guys with your program that you're guiding them on now that maybe you weren't having to guide them on as much last year, or what's working the best right now to turn more of your leads into deals?
Yeah. So I think you want to get to that appointment as quick as possible. 2 or 3 steps, you've got a lot of stuff falling out of that funnel, I guess you can call it. You want to go from call to appointment. But let's talk about on that actual call. So how do you tighten that up? Well, we've already talked about they want to feel like they're going to be taken care of. So I'll talk about that again in a moment. But there's also some other stuff you want to do, right? What you have to start thinking about this question: why wouldn't they see me? Why wouldn't they book an appointment? Well, it's usually around not setting clear expectations. If they don't know what's happening on the appointment, if they don't know, if they don't know you, so if they don't trust you, if they think it might be really uncomfortable, or they might be pressured into something, or something like that, then they're not going to take that next step. So I say on that call, what's really important is to just let them know, hey, these are the problems we help with. Yes, we can probably help you. And then, by the way, if we do take this next step, which I'll either recommend or not recommend after we find out a little bit more about your property and situation, here's what's going to happen. I'll come out there. We'll send Johnny out there. You'll love him, whoever it is. 30, 45 minutes. It's not a big deal. They'll walk the property. They'll view it. They'll answer any questions that you have. They may have a few questions for you about your situation. So if we need a structure, an offer, for anything in particular, we can do that. We're really flexible. And then they'll give you the offer. And if you love it, we'll talk about next steps. And if anything about it doesn't work, the timelines, anything whatsoever, no big deal. They see a lot of houses. They don't buy them all. we're just looking for the win-win. And 1 out of 5 or 6 of these appointments is a win-win. So if it is, awesome. If not, no big deal. So that's really basically the conversation. Plus you're going to add in, just the basic questions you want to get about the property and their situation.
Dude, the thing I love about that, and I want people to take that and rewind that last couple minutes, because that right there, if you guys even use that framework John gave you guys for that call and break it down and understand what he talked about, and I'm sure there are parts that just for the sake of time that he couldn't go into there, right? He goes into all that in his program, but even that little bit that he gave you guys, there was a lot of making sure that like John said, that they're very clear on what will happen and what won't happen. Here's what will happen, and you know what? He didn't say these words, but what won't happen is we won't pressure you. He didn't say those words, but it came through very clear. I'm like, oh, cool. So it feels like a pretty easy, low pressure situation then. Awesome. I can do that. And then also what was really cool too is, and I haven't heard a lot of people say this, at the end of yours, you said we buy, we don't buy them all, but we buy maybe 1 in 5, 1 in 6 houses of the ones that we see. I think that's amazing. So why is it that the investor should say something like that? What's that do in the conversation?
Yeah, it relieves pressure. It says, hey, we're looking for, we're not there to hammer you over the head and try to, buy your house. It's, hey, if it's perfect, if it feels good for both of us, if it's a win-win, then we'll talk about next steps. That's obvious. But if something doesn't feel right, again, no pressure. It's not right. And it also sets the expectation that we're not showing up expecting the buy on our end. Yeah. We're showing up open-minded, and the conversation it'll take us wherever it takes us, and whatever the best thing to do for both parties is, then we'll talk about that next step. So, and you even do that to set up the call, right? If you want the call to go well, you just set up those same expectations. Hey, this call usually takes a few minutes. Answer any questions you have. I have just a few questions about your property and what you're looking to do. If that goes well and you're comfortable and want to talk about the next steps, I'll outline what typically happens next, and then you can decide whether or not that makes sense for you, right? So even doing that at the beginning of the call leads you into that call really easily. And then you could talk about the appointment at the end. So it's really just about relieving their need to be taken care of, to solve a problem, and then just setting expectations so they're comfortable with continuing to move forward.
Dude, so you have that phone call, you show up. What are some of the things right now, especially with all the iBuyers that are coming out there, and there's just a billion new wholesalers and flippers coming out of the market. What are some of the things that those savvy investors you're working with, that you're guiding, are doing that are helping them crack through when they actually show up and meet the person versus the iBuyer versus the newer investor versus all the clutter out there? Yeah.
So from a high perspective, they're having a completely different conversation. They are solving a very different problem, and they're asking very different questions than everyone else. And that's how they're setting themselves apart. Now, an iBuyer and a lot of investors, the conversation they have is about what's the house worth and how much can I give to you? And those usually, there's some friction there, because they're always going to believe the house, they can get more, the house is worth more. And in many cases, they can. And the investors trying to convince them to take less by somehow explaining that it's not worth as much as they think, and Zillow's wrong and this and that. That's just a tough conversation. Now, the ones who are just crushing it, it's a different conversation. It's different questions. The conversation they're having is they're quickly transitioning into a value, from the value of the home to what is going on. What problem am I here to solve? Either, what's going on that you no longer want to happen or you don't want to experience anymore? Or, hey, what else, where are you trying to get to? What are you trying to accomplish? And they get deep into that conversation. And when they do that, they usually uncover some bigger problems, some personal impact type stuff. Like, I'm stressed about this. I can't handle it anymore. I'd love to be over here. I can't, if I got to do that, life would be amazing. And that's a different problem. And when they end the sales call, it's not a pitch. It's, hey, here's what I know, right? Here's where you are. Here's where you want to be. Here's all the concerns you have about taking that leap. I'm going to address all of those. And the only thing you need to decide after I'm done, telling you how we'd structure an offer and how we'd help you, bridge that gap, is if that's a big enough problem worth solving today. And it might be, it might not be. That's up to you. So they're not talking about the value of a home. They're talking about how big of a problem this is, how much it's impacting this person, their loved ones, people around them, what it's keeping them from doing, and so on. And that's a much more valuable problem to solve. So at the end, it's, hey, I could give you $60K for the property. We would do it in this way, but it's going to ultimately help you get to where you want to go, help you get away from what you want to get away from. And it's your job just to determine if that's important to do right now or not. Totally different conversation.
I love it.
Thank you, man.
So so you got the iBuyer part of it down. The iBuyers and everyone focuses primarily on the offer and, like you said, the value of the house. Instead, you want to focus on the problem. Are there any main things that are popping up right now that you're having a lot of questions on from your clients at your events that we can run through some of the biggies?
Yeah, I'd say the two biggest clients, or excuse me, the two questions I'm getting asked the most right now are phone versus face-to-face sales, which is better? What should I do? And the other thing we're running into is, hey, lots of competition. I am getting more, let me think it over, or I'm going to talk to other investors and getting more offers than I ever have before. So I don't lock down the deal. What do I do about that? So happy to chat about both of them.
Let's do it.
Phone versus face-to-face, in my opinion, one is not better than the other. They're both tools. It's what fits. They're both strategies. What fits your business best? So if you have a lower lead flow, right? If you get, let's say, 5 to 10 really quality leads a week. I mean, they're qualified, right? They didn't just call in, but they got a house. You can buy the house. They've got the issues you solve. It's a good lead. I'd show up on every one of those appointments because your chances of closing that deal are going to increase. Because you're there, you're going to have a better conversation. There's a dozen different reasons why that's more effective. But if it's the opposite problem, if you're if you're on the other end of the spectrum and you've got more leads than you can handle, well, then it starts to make sense to take a portion of them and do them over the phone. Maybe the ones you can't book immediately or can't get to, or maybe second tier type of appointments. Or if it's a whole lot, do them all over the phone. Now your conversion rates will decrease a little bit, but you're talking to more people. So you can take a 10 or 15% conversion rate dip if you're talking to, 500% more people. It's just simple math. You're gonna do better. So one is really not better than the other. It just depends on the situation, and that situation is lead flow.
Cool. And that, guys, that's a big deal right there, because same thing. I think a lot of people look into buckets. They go, well, shoot, it's got to be this way or it's got to be that way. And like John said, that's a perfect way to think about it, y'all, is the best. I always look at what's good, better, best, right? Good is getting them on a phone. I'm sure there's some sort of better in there. Best is like in person, shaking hands, in their kitchen, like that's best. But then you have to look at your business, your lead flow, the time you've got, and go, cool. What is the good, better, best? Well, cool. Right now with this section of leads, we're going to do the good or the better. The best ones, we're going to show up in front of them on that. So good, better, best model. I love that. So on the second one, man, where people are kind of having a lot of questions of, or objections of, let me think it over, or let me go talk to the other ones. What's the best way to combat that right now?
Yeah. So there's two ways. Really, the first way is to have a solid sales process. Obviously, that's what I do. So that's where my mind first goes. But the way I think about it is like this. If you don't have a clear decision one way or the other, there's very few reasons why that actually happens. Very few root causes. One, it might be a no, and they just, don't have the heart to tell you. They might, for whatever reason, they might feel like you're going to pressure them or not leave their house, or maybe they just really like you and they don't want to let you down. So it might already be a no. Number 2 out of 3 here is motivation just might not be there, right? They just don't have enough motivation brought to the surface, connected all the dots for them to go, this is something that's important for me to take action right away. So you have a lack of motivation. The only other reason why this happens, this is a third and final reason, is because there's a deal killer standing in the way. There's some concern. There's someone they got to talk to. There's something they've got to figure out. So the reason why I lean on sales process is because the right sales process will amp up motivation to where it needs to, as high as it should go, not introducing something that's not there, but taking whatever motivation they have and exposing it, right? And also identifying each one of those deal killers or roadblocks and dealing with them. So that's one, is it's deal killers or motivation. That's the only reason why that happens, or it's already a no. So, if you don't already have a solid sales process that kind of ferrets all that stuff out, the next best thing is to just stop accepting maybes and think it overs. If we think about it, there's literally no such thing as a maybe or think it over. There's a yes, and everything else is a no by default. Because if I ask any investor, I say, "Hey, you left the property. Did you get the deal?" No. Okay. So what does that mean? Well, I didn't get the deal. It's
Yep.
You can call it 1,000 different things, but it's not a yes. You got yeses and all the other junk with all the other names. It's still a no. You didn't get the deal. So just dealing with reality and getting to the end of that appointment and just start calling it what it is. Anything other than a yes, say, hey, in a very nurturing, kind way, obviously, that's a no. Because if you take that approach, and I'll even tell you what it sounds like in just a moment, but if you take that approach, what will happen is, if it really is a no, you've now taken all pressure off the table and given them permission to say, hey, yeah, it is a no. I don't think this is going to work. Bang, that's a good thing. Like when you know where you're at, you can work from there. You can pivot. You can, how to follow up or not to follow up. And it's up to you, but you have the data, you can do something with it. The other two things it will do is uncover those deal killers. If there's motivation there, but something is standing in the way, you'll often hear something like, no, it's not that. It's just that I got to figure out, or I'm still wondering about. And then bang, you got that data. You bring it up to the surface, and now you can deal with it, right? Or it's a motivation issue, right? So if you go through that down that road, and it's nothing standing in the way, I just don't know if it's time yet. Then we know, hey, we could dive back into motivations. There's specific questions you can ask to uncover motivation and kind of that type of thing too. But yeah, so I recommend giving them a no at the end. Stop accepting maybes and think it overs altogether.
So what's that sound like in the act of the thing? So let's say you're kind of at the stalemate. It's definitely not a yes yet, but then kind of what do you do? What do you do next? What do you say?
Yeah, so I give them the no again in a very nice way. The last thing you want to do is sound like you're upset or it impacted you in any bad way. So it sounds like this. So hey, Tom. Listen, this is a huge decision, and there's really a lot of moving parts, and I totally understand. I'd want to take as much time as possible to think about it. But you know what? I've been doing this a long time, and really, after everything we've talked about, everything we've worked through, I think that at this point, if you're not 100% comfortable with moving forward with something like that, what that probably means is that this isn't a right fit. And if it's not a right fit, we probably just need to call it a no. I think that would be doing you a good thing. But also for me, my business runs on buying houses. And if I'm not buying this one, I need to buy another one. So I can't just leave offers with you and say, hey, anytime during the next year, if you want to buy, call me, or sell, call me up. So for both our sakes, I think if we're not comfortable moving forward, that's 100% okay. But we probably need to call this a no. So that's how you do it.
Dude, that's so good. And I know a lot of people have heard or talk about a takeaway sale, and I'm not sure if you would consider that a takeaway sale, but it's really cool because what it does, y'all, if you're watching the YouTube version, this one thing that was cool about it too was you could even see John was like embodying that situation physically too, and it was really cool because it. The way it looked too, man, it felt like, man, he really cares about the situation. Like you kind of looked down a little bit. You were thinking, you were deliberating. It's like, this is important. This is important for you. It's not something I'm just flippantly saying, oh, it sounds like not a yes then, right? Like pressuring them like a used car salesman. You're pulling back going, man, I really care about this. And it just, man, we talked about a lot of stuff. And if it's still not to the point where you feel comfortable yet, let's just call it what it is, right? And it's cool because it is, you care at that point. And you're like, man, I've put in a lot of work to this, and so have you. And if we haven't come together on it, there's something missing there. I love it. The next thing too with it, y'all, is a lot of people get scared to introduce the no. A lot of people think that, shoot, the second I plant this word in their brain, the word no, then that's going to like give them all these ideas to not want to work with me and no. So when you're able to do that, what do you feel that does for the seller? At that point, that makes it to where it works. Of course, one side of it is if it's truly a no, like you said, it just saves everybody time. But let's say if you're able to shift someone from them not being ready to being ready. And I'm sure that happens quite often in that moment after you do that. What's going on in their mind, and why do they make the switch?
Yeah. So after you give the no, what it accomplishes is if there's any pressure whatsoever, it's now gone. When I was traveling, when I first started training in this space, I spent 6 months or a year traveling the country, different markets, and actually buying houses myself. And I could say the majority of the buys came after that no, because at this point it was like permission for everyone to kind of take off their costume or get out of role and just we were free just to say what was ever on our mind. So usually after that, my next question would be, man, now that it's over, what do you think you're going to do? And it hit them, right? It'd go, I didn't get this problem solved. And if you did good at the motivation part and all that, they really want to get the problem solved. And I don't know what I'm going to do. And then there's a little bit of a reality check there. Yep. And that often starts the conversation again, right? So it could be, I'm so concerned about this. Can we talk about it more? Or, whatever, this is getting in the way. It doesn't matter, but you start that conversation again. Yep. But you're starting it from a better place because you've agreed that this isn't going to happen. So now it's, hey, let's just chat like normal people. Yep. So that's why it works so well.
Dude, it's so good. I remember, because I'm an entrepreneur, of course, but I'm also a guy who likes a deal, right? Even if I don't need the darn deal, I just want to know the fact that I've made some sort of effort to not just accept the first thing that they put in front of me, whether it's buying a car or whatever it is. And so by doing what John had mentioned there, guys, once again, I want you guys throughout this call to reverse back, listen to those things over and over again, reverse back, write some of these things down, start to practice them, start to do them when you're talking with your next sellers on the phone or in person. And what happens is a lot of us just kind of want to get a deal. And we think by pressuring the sales guy, that they're going to like, oh yeah, well, I'll give you a higher offer or whatever it is. But then when John does that and he says, well, now that it's over, right? Or now that, that was really big because now that it's over, sweet. I'm not trying to sell you at all. Like it's over. We both acknowledge that. And now for me as the person that was trying to get a deal, I'm like, oh shoot, I put in all this time to even sit with this guy for like 30 to 60 minutes. And he seemed like a good dude. He wasn't trying to pressure me. And obviously my tactics didn't work of trying to like whittle him away to get a higher offer. Okay, well, let's chat again, man. Then I relent because I lost. I lost at that point. I didn't get what I was trying to get to make myself feel good that I negotiated. And I think there's a lot of people, especially males probably, that fall into that bucket unless they're in a really tough situation, of course, but they might want to feel like that they didn't just lay down and that there was some sort of back and forth. And at that point, you've relented like it's done. And now you go, okay, well, yeah, you're right. I didn't solve it. Let's start chatting again, kind of thing. Which I love it.
Yeah. One of the biggest reasons deals die or don't come to fruition is because the seller, they may even like the price, but if they don't feel like they're getting a good deal, like they might be getting taken advantage of or they're leaving money on the table, they will not move forward, right? So sometimes it's not even about, and I hear from investors all the time who say, I came in at this price. They said, well, if you can get to this price, I'll do it. They said, fine, I'll do that price. Deal still doesn't happen, right? Yep. So it's less about the money than most people think. And it's less about the money, or it's about the money less often than most people, think as well.
Mm-hmm. So earlier in the call, John, you mentioned that it really requires a sales process, right? You gave us kind of some glimpses into some things that people can say, which guys, if you even take just these things, like literally just the things that John's talking about here and the first episode, couple them together. Imagine if it won you one deal this year and your average profit per deal in your market's 20K. Like these episodes of about an hour and a half worth of content, it could be worth tens of thousands of dollars with just the 3 or 4 kind of script things that John dropped. So don't take any of that for granted, because even those little things could be one of the big things that shifts for you. But you did mention earlier, you said, man, you guys need a sales process. So high level, a breakdown. What does that even mean for people? What is in your world? If you go in, what do you see when you recognize that there's no sales process, and what does it look like after you've had a chance?
Yeah. So before there's any sales process, what happens is a lot of people don't get deals that they thought they were going to get. And then they ask themselves and others, and they look for answers everywhere under the sun. Why didn't I get that deal? And they usually have no idea, and they don't come up with any answers. It's that they don't know. There's a lot of missing data. So usually when that happens, they blame something, right? Well, they don't know what they're doing. They're asking too much. They don't know how this works. Another investor offered too much. Whatever it is, right? So you just blame and you stop taking responsibility for it. Once you have a good sales process, basically you've got a way to close every closable deal. And that doesn't mean every deal will close. Not everyone should, but everyone that should, you will close it and know why. And everyone that doesn't close, you know exactly why it didn't work out. That's what a good sales process does, is there's no more guesswork. You don't walk away going, I wonder if it was one of the 30 things I said. I wonder if I missed something. Gotcha. You have the data. So that's the difference between having a process and not having a process.
So let's say you get to the end of that conversation, they tell you a reason why, and it doesn't close, and it's legit. You got to the end of it. Where do they document that? Is it in their CRM? Is it like in a piece of paper that they then hand to someone who's doing where do you guys suggest documenting that?
Yeah, I mean, usually it's documented in a CRM. Okay. I mean, it's just a best practice in any business whatsoever. Yep. There's it's just the easiest way to file stuff in a centralized location, and with turnover and things like that, it just makes sense. Mm-hmm. But here's the more important part from a sales perspective. When you go through and you have that type of conversation, and you actually care, and that's one of the caveats is you actually you got to care, right? Mm-hmm. You can't just do this. You have to care about people in the process and actually helping them. But when you do it and you find out it's not a deal, you have exponentially increased your odds of getting that deal if it ever becomes a deal, right? Mm-hmm. If enough time goes by, if something happens, if their situation changes or gets worse or whatever, you are the person they're going to. When you follow up, they're going to answer your calls because you treated them with respect. You had the right conversation. The rapport will be through the roof. They know they're not getting pressured. That works. So if you don't close a deal, you know why. But if anyone's going to get that deal afterwards, it's sure as heck going to be you.
Dude, so a couple more questions for you. We had our Carrot Camp event here a month ago. All amazing high-level investors. And I know several of them were your clients. Brent Moreno and Adam Johnson were out here from Mississippi. And they were talking about just starting to work with you. I don't know how deep they are into your world yet. But one thing that was coming up quite a bit is several of them in the room were starting to hire salespeople. So Brian Rockwell, one of our clients, he hired his first sales guy like 8 months ago. Took him a while to train him up, and Brian was trying to kind of stumble through, how do I actually manage this guy, and how do I know if he's doing the right work, and how do I know if he's messing up? And they just hired their second one that week. So what would you suggest for someone who has traditionally been doing their own calls, they're a solo operator or something like that, their own appointments, and now they're getting their first or second or fifth or whatever salesperson? How do I know, and what do I do to make sure that they're doing the right things? That I know, like you said, that, hey, are there certain metrics I should be looking at? Is there a certain cadence of reporting? Kind of what would you do if you were getting that first salesperson in? How would you make sure that you coach them to success, knowing that they're doing it?
Yeah. So, that's really taken on kind of what traditionally is a sales manager's role. And that's what happens in this industry is the owner usually takes on that role. And if the team gets so big, then someone else is placed to lead that team. Yeah. So a sales manager, essentially, what they should focus on is just a few things. Hiring the best talent. So number one is going to be, how do I make sure I'm getting the right person to begin with? Number two is going to be to hold that person accountable, make sure they're following the rules, doing the things they need to be doing on a daily basis to optimize what they are doing, and motivate that person. They may know what to do, but very few, I think it's somewhere around, 10 or 15%. I can't remember the exact stats, but 10 or 15% of salespeople are self-motivated. So that means the vast majority, you have to continue to motivate them to perform at their peak levels. So finding and hiring talent, holding them accountable to your processes, and then motivating them. Those are the three things any sales leader needs to do from just a high perspective. Those are the three core areas to focus on.
Mm-hmm. And then are you guys having weekly meetings with the salespeople, daily? Kind of what does that look like?
Yeah. So, we see quite a few different things. A quick daily huddle and a longer, usually hour-long sales meeting once a week is pretty much the norm. Okay. So before the day, hey, what happened yesterday? Give me the results. Okay. Now, what's the plan for today? How are you going to attack it? How, are you missing anything? Do you need anything? And then next thing, the next morning, okay, what we talked about yesterday, how'd that stuff go? What were the results? Did you learn anything? Okay, today, let's plan for today. That's a good daily huddle. And then on the weekly, what you really want to look at is you can take part of the time to just do a deal review. Yep. You know, what looks good, but it's just not flipping for some reason. Let's strategize. Let's figure out what we missed and what our strategy and plan is to re-engage. And then there's also that accountability piece. So what a lot of them will do is a lot of them record their phone calls and in-person calls if it's a one-party consent state and legal, obviously. And they'll pick one or two and they'll hold that person accountable by going through it either with them or with the team. Cool. Not in a haha, I got you or you did this wrong thing, but hey, let's make sure we're living up to the standards we've set and not missing anything. And if we did, we'll learn from it, right? So that's what they're doing on a weekly basis for the most part.
Guys, that's a biggie right there. So going back to some of the clients I was referencing earlier, they're amazing people, and what worked 2 or 3 years ago was great. But as their lead to close ratio started to tank, that's one of the first things that they should be doing. And I guided that particular client on as well. I'm like, dude, make sure that can you record what those agents are saying, just so you can kind of listen to how they're presenting, or hop on a couple calls with them so you can see, are they presenting things a little bit differently? Have they now that things are really hot for real estate agents, have they positioned their listing thing a little bit heavier than the buy thing? And that's just a big deal. If you don't really know what people are saying in those calls, it's really hard to know kind of what's falling through the cracks. So that's big, man. I love it. Dude, I could talk sales stuff all day long. Just kind of like the cool thing is we could do 2 hours of you role playing situations. I think that's what people love the most here is they love the strategy, but then they love hearing the craft, that you deliver of, man, saying it in these ways. So appreciate you in a big way. But this is my main purpose of this call. And y'all, I want you guys to make sure that in a market like this, there's a lot of things, of course, that we can help you guys at Carrot with on the pre-framing side about getting more of the traffic in. But no matter how good your website is or your leads are or your pre-framing, if you're not doing what you need to be doing on the phone calls and in person, you can't close the darn deals. And that's where a lot of people are dropping the ball right now. They're dropping tens, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars of potential profits because they're trying to do things the way that they were doing them a year ago or 2 or 3 years ago when the market was a little bit different. And what you guys need to do right now is you need to get around people who are flipping that script, people who are making it so they are standing out. So they're connecting with those sellers at a deeper level in very specific ways. And they're going through a real sales process rather than just showing up, making offers and having some, rapport and then leaving. And so, John, where can people find out about you and just digging into your programs and stuff like that? And what does that look like? What does it look like for a company to then engage with you and work with you to get their sales process nailed?
Yeah, REIsalesacademy.com is the easiest way to get anything you need. Our website's there. It has all of our products. We have very few of them, but it explains them in detail. And there's videos, but there's also a lot of free training there. And different free resources and scripts. So I think we've got 100 to 150 videos. We got scripts. So, feel free to go there, check it out and grab whatever you need. We open it up to the public so you can use it and actually get some results.
Cool.
If we do work together, there's a couple things we do. We do 2-day boot camps where we go through, the entire sales process and role play and all that. We don't do a lot of those. The next one, is probably 3 or 4 months from now. I think it's in January, but we do 2, maybe 3 a year, depending on how they fall. But what most people do is our online training. The way that works is basically every training we've ever done is in a library. So you can access it and go through it really quick. Usually when people join, they'll ramp up real quick. But we also do a live weekly call where I hop on the phone. And there's really 12 core courses we do. There's a lot of training we have, but there's 12 really important ones. So I go through week by week for 12 weeks myself with everyone on the call, and we practice and we go through the lesson and I teach it there and we role play and we do exercises. And once that 12 weeks is over, we just start over again. So any teams that sign up for our online academy, you pay once and it's good forever. So the teams that join, we've had teams with us now 5 years. The other thing is hey, there's turnover and things like that happen. So, if you need it as a resource, you have it as a resource at any time, no matter what team you have, how big you grow. So That's the best for people who are starting to hire salespeople, because, hey, you might hire one or two duds, or for whatever reason it doesn't work out. It's not like you wasted your investment there, right? So that's how people typically work with us.
I love it. Guys, go check it out. We're going to put the link in the show notes as well. And I'm going to reiterate this, y'all. Carrot's going to help you with the front end of it. And you guys got to go through our training and execute. And we do have services that can help do that for you if you want to. But then without nailing the back end of it, which is exactly what John's talking about, exactly what they help people do, then all that's going to be for naught. And you're going to get the low hanging fruit, right? But you're going to be losing a lot on the back end if you don't. So John, I appreciate you coming back for a second time and just doubling down on what we did in the first one. Once again, the first episode will be in the show notes, guys. Go check out John. He's got lots of great content online. Go check out his training. It's going to be a well worth the investment. If you close one extra deal per year and your average profits, let's say 20K again, that's going to be multiple ROI immediately, just by making what you're already doing work better. We're not even talking like adding more leads. We're saying just make what you already got in front of you work way better and pull more profits out of it. Squeeze more juice out of the lemons, I would say. So John, appreciate you, man. Have an amazing rest of the time. Any parting words for people?
Thank you. It's always a pleasure. You know what? The only parting words I'd have is just to let people know that sales doesn't have to be a weird, uncomfortable, pushy thing. You don't have to be the stereotype. The best salespeople and investors we've worked with, when they began, they thought, I didn't ever think I knew how to sell, was capable of selling, didn't know I was built for it, didn't know I could enjoy it. So a lot of investors get into this because they like real estate. They didn't get into it to become salespeople, but that's part of the job. So for anyone that's struggling with that right now, just saying, this is the worst part, I don't look forward to it, I just want to let you know that it doesn't have to be that way. And for a lot of the best investors, it's actually not that way. It can be a fun, enjoyable thing for you or your acquisition agents.
I love it. Couldn't have said it better. Guys, have an amazing rest of the week. Go follow John. Go check out his stuff. Go leave a rating and review over on Apple iTunes. If you love this episode, if you got some things out of it that you know will change your business, please put a comment over there, put a note in there, put a review. It's going to help get the message to more people. And of course, go check out the archives and the previous episode with John. Have an amazing rest of the week, guys. And I appreciate you, John. Thanks, man.
Bye-bye.